I think it's just so timely because look at where the world's at today. And I grew up in New York in the 80s,
Oh,
and
yeah.
God, New York in the 80s, there was that, and people, talk, there's a million of these toxic masculinity, or there's the feminine man, or the different. And I think that, I don't know, maybe it's just the way culturally or whatever. I think that there's, just being classy. I don't know if that, I don't even know if that term exists anymore, but
Right.
being a classy, educated man, a gentleman, it's not about taking advantage. Even if you can take advantage, that's not that's not fair. That's just
But that's not the culture.
but that's right. That's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say. It's almost like, and now today's youth and all this, I looking at it from, because I work with a lot of young actors and talent, and I kind of see whether it's a role from back in the 80s, and it's very interesting, the psychology that you're always looking at, the lens you look through
Right.
society
Right.
and the different things. So what you're saying, I'd love you to expand more on
Yeah.
you and the journey, and because I think that's very important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to there's a it's balance.
Right.
So
And it's knowledge, because I'll tell you, it was a learning experience. Law enforcement and service providers. I am a service provider right now. Quest of Freedom is a service provider. But in the beginning, law enforcement was battling. So, law enforcement, we want to arrest the bad guy.
right.
But what we didn't realize is that that victim, who's also the witness for her situation, was dealing with a lot of trauma. We couldn't put that person on the stand. So we had to understand, like, we had a case of a woman had been trafficked. And then we found out that she had sex with her trafficker after we started the case. And the agent dropped the case. The U.S. Attorney's Office, they dropped the case because they were like, hey, she had sex. What jury's going to see her as a victim? But we didn't understand trauma bonding. And she didn't go out and meet the guy and have sex. She ran into him out of the blue after she had got away from him. And all of a sudden, everything triggered. She was right back in that slave mentality of being a victim. And he ran into her, and all of a sudden, she was back his slave. And that's why she had sex, not because she wanted to.
Right. Some weird kind of
Yeah.
just
It's like, again, people call it brainwash, but it's called trauma bonding. And we didn't know about that. This is a process. I'm telling you, it was like a learning process of breaking down cultural walls that we believe in law enforcement or personally. And then and so what happened, we ended up having another case that this same guy had trafficked an underage girl. And he had trafficked her and trafficked an underage girl. So we ended up bringing her back into the folds. But I just bring that point up. But this was a learning process. So let me start off by giving you guys, like, again, a lot of people hear about human trafficking. So let me define what it really is.
right.
And I won't give you the full story because I really, I know we got time, but
No, we got time. People
so-
want to hear this. They
so-
give us, tell us what, a lot of people, because
Yeah.
a lot of people, if they're actually watching this, which I think they will,
Yeah.
they want to know from someone like you. You're the expert,
Right.
and I can see that you're not holding back. You're just
Yeah.
putting it out there. So I think it's good that people, it's not just a soundbite. Because when you were speaking and talking about trauma bonding, it makes me think about, like, when somebody walks up and says, "Hey, how you doing?" and you just go, "Oh, I'm fine."
Right.
It's really not in an exchange.
Right.
And that's as a director and somebody in the acting world and all that, the words and the intent and all that is what makes us connect as humans.
Right.
And that's what we're selling as a product, if you will. So when you dissect the human emotion and the human element, and that's what I want to I'm kind of pulling that out of you, because I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of value to people understanding that they may just quickly be like, "Oh, okay, it's bad."
Right.
But let's get into the
weeds.
the weeds, man. Because I see it's in your eyes, and
Yeah.
I want to be educated. I
Right.
have to admit, I'm quite ignorant to that. I mean, I see what's on the news, but I haven't
Right.
had the opportunity to sit with someone who's
So
lived it.
We're definitely going to make you and the audience smarter.
Good.
In the media in some cases.
Well, that's easy for me. They're smart,
Yeah.
but me, I'm already getting
Well,
smart.
I wouldn't even say smarter, but at least more aware.
Yeah.
So our first human trafficking laws hit the books in the year 2000. And that was because the United Nations, they gathered in Palermo, Italy, and they charged all countries to deal with human trafficking. And they say, hey, we need to address this issue. And they came up with the 3 Ps: prevention, protection, and prosecution. Prevention, protection for victims, and prostitution. I mean, not prostitution,
Right.
but prosecution for perpetrators. Those were the 3 Ps that we were supposed to address.
In 2000.
In 2000. But it was only around 2010, 2012 when we realized, because a lot of people are confused. When you say human trafficking, they're assuming that word trafficking, meaning people are coming from somewhere else.
Right.
But when we look at human trafficking and sex trafficking, again, which everybody think it is, and I'm going to give you the 4 types of trafficking. Everybody think it's coming from somewhere else. But remember, in the United States, the sex trafficking victims, the majority of them come from America, because we've had prostitution and pimping part of our culture for a long time.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So those victims were already here, right? And then we talk about labor trafficking, which is another form of trafficking. What is that? People coming from other countries, working in our kitchens, working in our restaurants, working in our fields. And
That's a very topic right now with the border issue.
it is the labor trafficking is 60 to 70% of all trafficking. But before we get into all that, let me back up. So in the laws addressing the 3 Ps, the elements of human trafficking, the basic elements, because you have some things that aiding in any way, transporting, doing different things, any aid that you give to a trafficker, that's the side crimes. But the main elements for human trafficking, you got to have one of these 3: force, fraud, and coercion. Force, obviously, I beat you to make you do what I want you to do. Coercion is the threat of hurting you, somebody in your family, kicking you out the house, not giving you food, anything that a human being that thinks they need and you could be exploited from it, that's coercion if you feel like it's being taken away. And the last one is fraud. Hey, come to Miami, be a model, be whatever, be a singer. I was just meeting with a person that was a survivor of this, that we helped, and that she lived in Canada, but she came here to be in the music industry and ended up being trafficked. And I just met with her this past weekend because she was in visiting, and that's a whole nother story. And hopefully one day you might be able to interview her, you know?
Interesting. No, yeah, because I think this industry has a history. A lot of people know, and they look and go, the entertainment industry, and they kind of, you turn your head a little to the music industry. Well, what you were just saying, look at what the music videos today, and look at where, she's OnlyFans.
Yes.
Look at what's good. So, I mean, listen, you're talking. I got a lot of thoughts. As you can say. I'm going to shut up. You go.
No, so those are the elements: force, fraud, or coercion. But understand this: since the year 2000, and we came up with the law, and those elements only apply to adults. So if you were under the age of 18, there were no such thing as child prostitution. But it's so hard to change culture. Check this out. It took Florida 16 years to finally pass a law that says no more arresting kids under the age of 18 for prostitution. It took Georgia 19 years.
But I'm confused. So
the federal law.
Yeah, so a 17-year-old could be out there being
sold for sex, even if they look like they want to be part of it. They are victims. But I don't need to have those elements. They are naturally victims. I don't have to prove an element.
But wouldn't the person that's a minor, wouldn't they go to jail for?
Yeah.
Okay.
But what I'm saying, you don't need to have an element when it comes to a child.
It makes so much sense. Right, that's what I was going to say. It should be like, it's just my mind's blown. Like, how is that not even a thing? Like,
but you get it right now. But why did it take our governments? And there might be a state out there that is still having laws arresting, kids, people under the 18 for prostitution. So in 2012, we had the safe harbor law. Now, the safe harbor law gave officers other options than arresting. So if this kid was all of a sudden like, yeah, help me, and I get you in a program, we want to arrest you for prostitution. But if you go, I don't need your help, or I'm not trafficked, I arrest you. This is how crazy it was. And 16 years, and this is what I do in this business. I'm trying to change culture because we're not going to arrest our way out of this. And so when you hear those facts, the laws came about in the year 2000. Since then, we shouldn't have been arresting kids for prostitution, but we didn't catch up. We didn't understand. We didn't know. And I'm still meeting officers that don't know that this is Human Trafficking Awareness Month,
Right.
And so even when I was the coordinator for the state of Georgia, my hardest job was to educate 57,000 law enforcement people. How do I get that system? How do I change that culture? How do I feed them this information that they understand that these people are victims? So in this world, we have victim-centered, trauma-informed. What that means is that it's not about my case. And that was a transition that law enforcement had to go through when we're dealing with the service. Because if we get a victim and we got them got them to a service provider, and I'm like, I need your victim. They're like, no, she's not ready. She needs to be healed. She needs to be helped. We weren't getting that until we finally clicked in our head that she's no good to me sitting on the stand if she's not in a healing process.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And there's still officers that don't get this. But that's where we came from. It's been a gradual. Any process is better than no progress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we came from. So understanding the elements, force, fraud, or coercion, that's the element. The 4 types of human trafficking: sex trafficking, which everybody talks about, labor trafficking, servitude/debt bondage, and organ trafficking. One of your staff members asked me, what is servitude? I go, well, rich people hire poor people to come work in their house from other countries, take their passport, because, by the way, that's the first thing a trafficker is want to do from you is take your documents. Why? Because if you don't have an ID or a passport, you can't get on a bus, plane, or train. And
you're not going anywhere. Yeah, I guess
and
you're
you
right.
can't apply for another job. So when you take their passport, because out of I'm responsible for you being in the country, it's bullcrap. Matter of fact, it's a federal law that if somebody takes your passport, that is a federal law that they can be charged with. And I love telling this because a lot of victims out there don't get this information.
Right, they don't know. Don't let anybody take your passport.
You got to have, because how can I, and the other thing why they do it, because how can I identify you?